everyone. Today we're talking about becoming empowered, all about estate planning. Really today I just want you to understand what the heck is estate planning when people talk about it. Generally we hear of things like an estate sale or all of the benefits going to their estate. We hear about beneficiaries, but we never really talk about it. It's kind of weird, right? If somebody dies, you want to be respectful and you don't want to say like how much money did they leave behind, right? But it's one of those things that you always want to be thoughtful or planning ahead when it's you or your family in terms of estate planning. So big example, we're up here in Minnesota, and unfortunately his estate stuff is still going on, is Prince. If you didn't know, Prince died. He didn't have a will. He didn't have an estate plan. And so, of course, there's tons of different people, businesses, companies that are all saying they have a piece of claim to his music, his business, his art. And so the state of Minnesota gets a multi-year, what's called probate, to decide who gets what. And they divvy up the different pieces of Prince's estate. What that means is, of course, now the state of Minnesota is going to take some of those assets and keep them. It's almost like taxes, right? So for that, now a piece of Prince's will and trust and all of everything that he could have protected, it's all been sort of given to the state. Well, why is that bad? For somebody like Prince, they've got a ton of money. His relatives, family should be okay. But if it's us and the state decides, hey, this person gets it versus this person, maybe that's not what you would have wanted. So today I'm just going to talk about a few things, a couple ideas for you to say, hey, if I'm going to do my estate planning, let me at least get a few pieces of things in order so that I don't have to worry. One of the first ones is called a will, last will and testament. So what the heck is that? Essentially, it's just, here are my intentions if I'm not here to say it. So for example, me and my family, if something happens to us, here's who gets to take care of our kids. For somebody with a large art collection, they might say, it's my intentions to donate this art to a museum. Essentially, it's just saying, here is exactly what I would want to happen in case I'm not around. In case I pass away, here's who gets to decide X, Y, Z. Well, why is that important? You always hear about the families where, a cousin or an uncle or siblings, they're fighting over things. It clearly could have said in the will, here's who gets what. Another big thing is called a healthcare directive. So this one it's kind of like a will, but you're still alive. So if you pass away, that's it, right? Well, if there's a healthcare directive, you're still alive, but somebody needs to make decisions for you. Typically, it might be a spouse. That makes sense, right? But if there's an instance where maybe you're not married, or maybe you've got a certain situation, maybe a business partner or something like that, you can say, this is who gets to make decisions for me in case I'm incapacitated. This is kind of tied to things with long-term care as well. As our parents age, they might say, I don't want to be resuscitated. So that actual bracelet that sometimes you see people wearing that says DNR, do not resuscitate, that's a healthcare directive. Don't do this. But in most cases, you hear things like, if somebody goes in a coma and the husband wants them to live, but the parents didn't want her to stay plugged in, and there's a big court battle. Well, if there would have been a healthcare directive, it could have said, here's what gets to happen, here's who gets to decide. Last thing I want you to think about is a power of attorney. Similar to a healthcare directive, but not just in terms of your health, your assets. So this one is very common with elderly parents, aging parents. They get to say, my eldest son gets to decide my financial matters in case I don't know what's going on anymore. Or again, if I'm out of the country, my lawyer gets to say, here's what happens for this case that we're closing, this business deal, for the next 2 weeks. So it can even be temporary, but a lot of times people put in these healthcare directives and power of attorney for the same family member. Totally okay. Last thing, something to think about is the trust. It might not apply to everybody that watches our videos, but if, for example, you have a business entity and you want to pass it down to the family, you can put it in a trust. It simply protects any assets or things that you have, keeps it out of your estate, which is really interesting, right? Technically, a trust has its own Social Security EIN number, and so with that, it becomes its own entity and takes it out of your estate. So to recap, something to think about: get a will done, a healthcare directive, a power of attorney, and if things get complicated, you can start thinking about a trust and further details as needed.